A-létheia continues on its second series of podcasts, the object petite A dwellers. And this time around, we're having an intellectual from Scotland that happens to be my friend, Mr. Niall Kennedy, that is going to be speaking to us about the general current affairs of the academic life in Europe and in the world, as an example of what happens in Europe and how we can compare it with other experiences that with people that live in other places of the world. Him being a great traveler and having lots of experiences that we will get to see throughout the conversation. So check it out, and I hope you enjoy it. Hello, good people from the internet. Welcome back to A-létheia. And we have our big friend, great friend, long time no see, Niall Kennedy. Before you get to speak, Niall, let's give a little bit of introduction for those in the future. Obviously have to be in the future because it's not live. That check this show will have the chance to get to know everything with time. So we have today at episode number 2 of the podcast, the object petite A dwellers, Mr. Niall Kennedy, which is currently a lecturer at the Department of French in Trinity College, Dublin. Also, he has a French, a degree in history and French at the University of Oxford, and a Ph.D. in French philosophy at Kingston University in London. Apart from that, we know from Niall that he has a chapter written in a book called "The Intercessor of Heteronym." Heteronym, I think I pronounced it well. Heteronym in Gilles Deleuze and Fernando Pessoa, where he tries to compare the poet with the philosopher. And lastly, he has coming, not disclosed the time, an article about Nasser Kemir, who is a Tunisian filmmaker, which I have not really heard of because, to be honest, I have watched a lot of movies from different countries, and I don't remember having watched a movie from Tunisia, so from Tunis. I have no idea. Anyway, welcome back, my friend. It's been a long time, and I've been looking forward to having an opportunity of having this type of conversation with you, and it's great that the pandemic made it all possible.
Hi again, Edgar. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you.
Hear me well? Good. Yes, 15 years. Can you believe? Half a lifetime, really, in some ways. Since 2007, when I lived and worked in Caracas, in Venezuela. But and it's great. And thank you so much for the invitation. It's great to be here and to speak to your audience as well.
Awesome. To be honest, I didn't really wanted to make that invitation so business-like. I would have made it would have been awesome if we could have had a friendly chat before, but we're making both in the same one today. So how have you been?
If it's a podcast, I don't need to be concerned that I didn't shave for a few days, so that's a good thing. I've been okay. The pandemic was very hard for everybody, as of course you lived through it too. For me as well, and we lost my uncle in the pandemic. But for me, the big sort of story of the last few years has just been fighting to get a job and to keep a job, because as I just said there, I work in universities in Trinity College Dublin. That's Ireland's oldest university. And supposedly it's best known and it's most prestigious, but over 50% of Irish academics are, if you've heard of the gig economy, they're employed like the gig economy. They're given hourly pay. They're given 0 hours contracts. They're given short-term contracts, 6 month, 9 month. So over
It
the
sounds
summer, they have to
amazing.
go onto the social welfare. It is a brutal, brutal struggle.
Oh,
So this is my 4th year in the current job that I'm in. But every June I get to be unemployed, and then I hear in August if I'm coming back or not, and it's not a guarantee.
wow.
So that part is very tough, you know. I think compared to like my father's generation, so
Mm,
my father is he's late 70s now, but he was a doctor,
okay.
and like his generation, there were stable jobs and secure jobs and professions that you could occupy, and that would give you a kind of stability for your life. But even if you have a lot of education, and I spent a long time educating myself, today it's just not as available. I'm sorry to start off with a huge political rant / complaint, but that's what's been on my mind. But I'm very happy to live where I live, and I'm very happy to do the work I do, and the opportunity to be in different creative projects. So maybe we can talk about some of those.
I'm really happy to have actually having you start with such an honest disclosure of what is going on, because to be perfectly honest, I don't think that many people are totally aware of what it is to be, the day to day of an academic today. In my
Mm.
case, I
I don't think my students are aware, for example. I
no,
think the students, none of them are aware, really. There's a
definitely.
culture of silence around it. So maybe speaking out like this is a good thing.
Well, yeah, definitely, because the age of communication is supposed to, reveal every hidden truth. Not there has to be no truth that is hidden or under the rock, as they say in the Bible, because everything needs to be heard today. The problem is that having all this information to our hand reach make us not necessarily really wise on how to use it, and I guess that's probably the reason why many people don't like to speak so much about these sort of things, or maybe these sort of things are not so able to people's reach. I guess so, but well, maybe I have a different idea about the same situation. But I love that the
Edgar, I'm very
things.
sorry.
Sorry.
I've just had to turn off my video because my internet is a little bit patchy. I think I missed the first half of what you said. Could you just briefly say that again? Sorry
Okay.
about that.
Don't worry, my friend. I was saying
Uh,
that we're actually glad that spaces like this are given for us to, air things like this that probably other people have no idea. And now more than ever. But at the same time, I was saying that in the age of communication, even though everything is supposed to be known and heard, much of this information that we have is not necessarily well used, because people have probably they don't have an idea of how to use so much information that is out there. I mean, right now you can get to know everything that's happening everywhere in the world if you put your mind to investigate about it, but the effects of knowing are a little bit not necessarily so optimistic. I don't know if you have a different idea about that.
well, I would also say that the new platforms also amplify lies, right? I mean, I'm sure
Yes.
we've all followed the anti-vaxxers. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Um, I actually went away with this last summer to a little village in Ireland, a surfing village, for a little holiday. It was my staycation, and I was meeting people, very well educated people with master's degrees, who were telling me that this was a conspiracy and the
Yeah.
vaccine was dangerous and whatever. And so, um, a very well planned disinformation campaign can really take advantage of these platforms
Oh yeah.
before the truth has got its boots on, if I, to use the old saying. And what I've been thinking about recently, I've just joined Twitter. I kept away for 10 years. I just joined to campaign on this issue of employment rights.
How do you
But I
betray
think
yourself that much?
I know it's prostitution, really. But the way that Twitter is set up, really, I think promotes just anger.
Oh,
I
yeah.
see people that live on Twitter and visibly become angrier and angrier, and they're involved in contentious debates like the transgender rights debate, for example, is a huge one
Yes.
in Europe right now. And the side of two groups just shouting past each other and
Oh, yeah.
spending all day on the online circulating amongst themselves conspiracy theories is a very unencouraging one, and that's what I've been seeing really the past couple of years. That's why I never joined Twitter. I'm only in, I am now, but I was only in Facebook for a long time.
What made you get into Twitter if you understood that that was happening?
Because I just think I have to try and reach a wider audience now, and an audience of opinion formers and opinion makers with this campaign. So I've been writing to members of Parliament here in Ireland, and we have protests planned, and we're going to form a group. I might go on hunger strike. I feel that strongly about it. Just for a symbolic time. But there is a lot of money in universities in Ireland. The students pay €3,000 a year for their studies, which is the highest fees in Europe, in the European Union.
Okay.
But it's not going to the people that actually work, that teach. It's going to these new buildings, these great campuses, and it's going to employ more managers, more and more and more managers. So that's the.
It's a big bubble. It's a big bubble, isn't it?
Yeah, it's if you like, it's just, I think all the professions are being hollowed out, and people are just losing security now in every sort of profession, even in rich countries. I came from a perfectly middle class background. I had a good education, and I would have expected, and I'm 40 now, I would have expected to have more confidence about the future, my own future, than I do. So
Yeah. Well,
however,
but of reality today, and this is a very cool thing that we started off with this topic, mentioning the whole situation. Can you explain a little bit, maybe because obviously my audience is not as knowledgeable of it is your audience, of what you're doing exactly with the campaign you're working on. Can you explain a little bit, like, what is sort of the purpose of motivates you be involved in it, and what probably you're thinking that's going to be the result of your involvement in it?
Of this campaign, you mean? Yes.
Yes.
So,
of this campaign.
yeah. So basically, the Irish government speaks of education up into and including what we call third level or university education as if it were a public good. Okay. The minister, Simon Harris, the Minister for Higher Education, I won't have the exact quote, but he said, the education system is the best way to safeguard the future of our country. Okay, so they speak of it as a public good, not just a private benefit for the individual student that acts as a consumer in the marketplace, but as something which benefits, increased education benefits us all. And so if that's the case, then the university should be treated as a public service.
Yes.
And if that's the case, then I feel that the government has the responsibility to ensure a certain degree of dignity and a certain degree of fair treatment for the people that work there, like myself. I trained years and years to become qualified to this level. And I teach, I would say, over 200 students a year, and they pay a minimum of €3,000. And if they come from outside of Europe, they pay more. So why is it that I am unemployed for the summer months, and struggling to get a job, and at a time when there are high rents to pay in Dublin, and of course you want to plan for your future. So that's the problem. The fact that what is being talked about as if it were a public service is being treated as if it's just a private marketplace that the government doesn't have to particularly intervene in. with the burden of the uncertainty and the debt being passed on to students and academics. And, in order, we're at an early stage, but in order to tackle this issue, I've been meeting with a group of people from across the country, from if you know Ireland, from Cork, from Limerick, and other places around the country, and Dublin, of course, to think about how we can campaign. Do we lobby ministers? Do we start protests? Do we write to the press? Do we try and interest the different TV stations? Do we interest the Irish language TV station? It's a small country. It's only 4 million people. So there ought to be ways of attracting attention. And in fact, Ireland is probably one of the best educated countries in Europe in terms of the percentage of people that have a degree. So it's proven it's a country that values education. But for the last 10 years, since really the great financial crash of 2008, the government have tried to just get it on the cheap, very cynically.
Well, that this, I guess that obeys the same movement that every government is trying to be part of worldwide. It's not just in your country, but it's just terrible that it is happening in your country the way it is happening, since the conditions and how policy must be applied for every country has to be, according to every country's conditions and particularities, right? And we can see that this corporate vision that is being imposed in every little different aspect of our lives obeys ideology, but doesn't really see reality. As you mentioned before, having a country that has so few people, in comparison to other countries, 4 million people is not really a big number, and having such a proportion of them highly educated, university educated, it is to be taken as a privilege of, when you have to compare your country with this country with any other different country in the whole world, especially with today's realities about education, this huge reality that is student debt, and that it is the new demands of emerging markets, etc. I just believe that maybe the thing is that we haven't really changed or adapted our brains or our mindset or our view of the world conveniently to the different changes that we have been experimenting. It's like our mind is like 2 levels behind. And what I mean is conveniently like this is like, you made the example before with the generation of your parents and them being academics and how reality for them was totally different. Some of them, I remember, that could have the option of taking a sabbatical year or even more to do whatever different personal goal, and then come back to university or school or wherever center they were working at the moment. And that was a situation that could happen. Now, years after, there is different changes in the population. More people supposed to be requiring for higher education, university, etc., etc. So if you have more student demand, then you are supposed to have made the different institutions growth on pair to this demand. And what I mean by growth is it is the growth of the physical conditions, institutions, the buildings, etc. But it's also the economic growth of the personnel that is involved in university life. As you mentioned before, people that work there are supposed to be considered too. Now, you can see that rates in money, they do raise, but you don't see the conditions raising ever. And that's a situation about this mentality that I think that this little convenient, this phase or disjuncture between what is really happening and the mentality that we are supposed to still have about how education is seen and how education is valued. There is a huge differentiation between those two positions, and I don't know if that how I see it somehow this describes a little bit the situation that you're seeing right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think what governments, if I can use this term, the neoliberal model of
Yeah.
education is that it's a private benefit to
Yes.
a student, right? And the student will come out, will get a better job, and will earn more money over his or her lifetime. And so, because of that, it is justifiable to make them take on really a lot of debt. Now, I said that Ireland is the highest fees in the EU, but England is even higher. It charges £9,000 sterling, so roughly €10,000 a year
Oh,
for that. You know, that's just for the tuition. So you can easily come out of a degree in England with the levels of debt that you'd previously only seen in the United States, 70,000, 80,000 pounds, right?
mm,
Um, but when you've done that and got your degree, well, where are the high-paying jobs? Because what we also see is that the gig economy is being expanded to sector after sector. And so, for example, when I started my current job, it was in 2018, two professors retired, but instead of replacing them with permanent positions, they were just replaced with hourly paid contracts. Or so, I mean, the expansion of just this casualization, which makes for the employee, it means that they have no security or ability to plan.
yeah.
They can't get a mortgage. They have to rely on renting. Many people find that they can't plan to have children because they don't know if they will still be in employment. You know, things like that. Just really crucial life decisions.
Yes.
Um, which, compared to my parents' generation, rents were much lower, house prices were much lower, jobs were secure. In many ways, they were better off than we are,
Yeah.
which sounds absurd, but I think in many ways, not in every way, but in many ways, it's true.
Yeah. Well, what has changed is the concept of value. Well, not the concept of value, but the value in itself. I mean, you have to consider all the money that you dedicated. Money. What I mean, I mentioned money precisely on the way it is an investment in all your education process to the money that you're supposed to be getting once you're
Mm.
working. You realize that it doesn't add up that much.
Absolutely. And if you're like me and you teach a humanities subject,
Uh,
then often governments think, well, you know, that sort of thing, if a rich kid wants to study that for 3 years and pay €30,000, you know, that, because that's just kind of like, that's like a toy, you know, that isn't useful for real people, you know. And so we're seeing humanities really strongly cut back, and more business degrees, you know, and more master students brought from other countries and
how,
treated like cash cows.
however,
It's
I
really unethical.
wonder if it only happens in humanities. I mean, like, can we say that math teachers, physics teachers have it better?
Well, I would say that those departments are not likely to be shut. Okay, but if I think, for example, of what's happened in the UK, I mean, departments of Russian and Eastern European studies have been shut.
No.
In you know, in some parts of the UK, there are hardly any foreign languages taught anymore. Philosophy departments are shutting. You know, history departments are shutting. Even in the context of a level of student demand that is sustainable. You know, it's not as if the student numbers are falling away to nothing. You know, it's people still want to come and study that subject, but university managers are thinking, well, you know, do we need this? Why don't we focus on bringing in more MBA students from China who always pay 15,000 a year? You know, so
Wow.
it's becoming a quite vulgar marketplace, if I can put it that way.
Wow.
So.
Eh. Well, as you said, maybe it's meant to just simply disappear and be rethought differently. sad because thank you. We are living that the whole process of it, and well, I can tell. I can speak a little bit about myself and how, for example, the School of Philosophy of the UCB, where I graduated from in Venezuela, is actually going through that process. It's being thought of. Is I mean, the future of this school is of the faculty is being considered whether it's going to continue or not. There are really, really good teachers that are still there, but the most of the big names had already left. And some people actually consider that a little bit pointless. Philosophy, as it is, it's not necessarily very popular. And imagine not having any funds to it. It's I wonder how do we think that the government should actually care for this for keeping or keep saking the academic cultural foundations of any sort?
Yes, I do personally. Um, Let me introduce my own conspiracy theory.
Oh,
If you look at data and voting behavior, you'll find this in the United States. You'll find this in the UK, I think also in France. I'm sure you find it in many countries. The
yeah,
more educated somebody is, so high school education, maybe a certificate of some kind, a degree, a postgraduate degree, the more educated you are, the less likely you are to vote for today's conservative parties. Okay? Education is a big division in political belief, more so than age and more so than social class.
yes,
So what is their incentive to fund education if it creates people that will not vote for them? That's the one thing I'll say about that. Maybe it's a conspiracy theory, but yes, I mean, one thing I'm teaching, because I have to teach. I have to teach everything. I work in a French department, but I could be teaching linguistics. I could be teaching literature. I could be teaching philosophy or history. Some of these things are like linguistics and sociolinguistics are absolutely not in my area of expertise at all. Okay, I had to kind of study it myself before
okay,
I could teach it. But one of the topics in linguistics was the status of minority languages in France. And I don't know if you know this, Edgar, but UNESCO have a whole division on minority languages. So, let's say Welsh, let's say Breton, any language that is spoken only by a small and decreasing number of people. And UNESCO's actual official aim is to preserve every language because it is seen as an expression of culture as valid as the Mona Lisa or the Taj Mahal or something like that.
yeah,
So I absolutely see that universities as centers of culture are are absolutely vital to having a society that's worth living in my view. And I'm not saying that someone like me should get the salary that a banker at one of the major at Lloyd's or Chase Manhattan or something. I'm not saying I should get that. I
sure.
wouldn't necessarily want all that money. I think a stable and secure professional salary is really all I'm asking for, in this campaign. But
True.
apparently that is too much.
True. Then again, you see that there is a big migration the area of humanistics to the area of communication. And you
Hmm.
can see that lots of philosophy is being taught online now for free,
Hmm. Hmm.
the same as language.
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Yes, exactly.
um,
Totally.
it's
We are in
democratizing it.
that. We are in that market actually, and
I can't. Mhm.
it seems that it's going like this part of our education is coming a little bit out of university and is getting straight to people's faces. Like, okay, you guys probably don't want to study there, but what if we show you this way? Maybe people are getting their social education and their let's say they're getting all the skills that come with humanistic education, like for example empathy, but it's through this, like a lots of it social media, lots of it different platforms like YouTube, etc.
Do you think they promote empathy?
Well, I don't
Because
think
I
that
don't really.
they promote it. I think that people get it no matter what. I mean, I'm not saying that there
Mhm.
are people that have the will and actually willingly make campaigns to promote social education. Let's say
Right.
any sort of mindful or mindfulness education for regular people. No, I don't think that that's purposely done. I think that that's an effect of the multiple voices that are there right now expressing themselves, as you mentioned before.
Mhm.
You don't see this so widely promoted in the places where it was in the past, like universities,
Mhm.
for example.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, you see that social studies are not being taught so strongly in university as they are taught in the street or online, which is pretty much the street right now, like an
Mhm.
analogy,
Yeah.
the street.
Especially the pandemic really forced people to shift their lives online in interesting ways. Um, and what you're doing with this podcast, I like, and I love the fact I can speak to you in Ecuador from Dublin. You know, to a country I've never visited. I would just say it's a double-edged sword. I suppose the cost of entry to the marketplace for ideas, if you like, has never been lower, right? Because you can set up your own podcast for almost nothing, right?
Yeah,
And so maybe to some extent, there's knowledge is more democratized, and that yeah, of course, that's a good thing. And I do think that blogs have, blogs which were really came into being 15 years ago, let's say,
yes,
have really improved journalism overall because journalism is now not just the preserve of newspapers, which are owned by wealthy newspaper owners. Okay,
yeah,
um, but I do think that I do think there's probably a certain um, there's a certain cost to this infiltration of every part of our lives by technology. And the students I teach now are aged about 20, 21, 22. So they were born at about 2000 and they've lived their whole lives online, right? Um, and now who knows if this is linked, but people are picking up on huge rises in the level of anxiety that generation's facing. Um, because they lack the ability. No, maybe that I can't particularly say, but they perhaps they don't have the same kinds of socialization that
mm,
previous generations had. I mean, I it's not my field per se, but I was quite shocked when I started teaching at how many students would come to me with mental health issues or
yeah.
anxiety, or they would say, I don't want to come to class because I feel like I can't. If you ask me to answer a question, I'll feel really anxious. Or, these were conversations I had to have. Um, and, what's the driving force behind that?
Well, you will be very surprised to know that in the last 5 years, I've been working at a school, at a high school. Particularly, I began my first year there was in high school, the last senior years, actually the last 3 years. But then I got changed to junior high, and I've been educating kids from 12 to 15
Mm-hmm.
years of age for the last
The
five
worst stage
years.
to be.
Yeah,
All right.
and everything that you just said, I see it
Mm-hmm.
weekly.
Mm-hmm.
What you were
Mm-hmm.
mentioning about how kids are so familiar to this vocabulary of psychological disorders. Oh man, that's my day to day. I have
Yeah.
basically become so knowledgeable of all the different possible learning disorders that they are actually there. that kids have. In fact, I discovered that I had one myself, and I didn't know
All right.
because
Okay.
of my interaction with these kids. I realized that I had this. It's not big; it's a little fraction. I'm supposed to be a slightly dyslexic.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know, and
Right. Mm-hmm.
particularly having the experience of seeing kids that suffer from the same issues plus others and so many others. You won't believe how many, in fact. I realized that this situation of what you were speaking is maybe correlated to the same thing that we were talking about. Like every generation is burdened with a particular issue that they need to deal with. The younger generation, you have more burden that is reflected on the technology that they're faced or they're even compelled to use. For example, my wife. She worked with little kids till November, December, and you could tell. Well, she could tell me the experience that she had about kids that in the pandemic they began their school experience online, not in a school, they not with
Mm-hmm.
other people,
Yeah.
not with other kids, but online, and how she worries of what the experience will be for them once they had to go to school and get to see other kids, because as she
Mm-hmm.
sees them now, she sees that these kids are really, they have a lot of problems to communicate with others.
Mm-hmm.
Among
Mm-hmm.
others, there's a huge social issue about normally how to have regular communication and among peers when we're speaking about really really young kids. But it's even worse if they have been isolated for all this long. If we are speaking about empathy for that generation, is
Yeah.
unreal.
Um, I do agree. I mean, I feel that it's maybe a different debate in Ecuador. I mean, I do feel that there was no alternative to lockdown. And I taught online for a year, and that was horrible too. I don't know. Just one more thing I would say is look where like new culture is, right? Look
Mm.
at who are the new important people, influencers. Okay, people make millions of dollars, shelling like repping products on platforms like Instagram.
Mm.
YouTube stars. Uh, Now, which I don't really follow, but much of it seems to be, making yourself look as ridiculous as possible for clicks. Um, this is like the TikTok, right?
Oh
I
yes.
mean, I'm not even on TikTok really. I don't see the point of TikTok, but I'm told that the biggest names in TikTok, and they're all like 19 and 20, got a house in London, and began just producing content for TikTok, and they're making these millions. It's interesting to see what that generation does with its methods of communication. But I just wonder if, in the context of a conversation about mental health,
Mm.
whether, for example, the omnipresent influencer that holds up these impossible beauty standards is a good thing for the average teenage boy or girl. That's just what I'd
Well,
what I'd want to leave you thinking about, if you like.
you're speaking about this, and I just think about for I don't know if you're familiar to this philosopher, what Slavoj Žižek was referring to, the real of the virtual, and
Mm,
how what right now our virtual reality is much more valuable than our real reality, because we
mm,
make our money online,
yes,
we meet people online.
yes,
In the pandemic, if you were single, there was no other
yeah,
option than being
yeah.
online. And everything is like that. It's online. So your online persona has been fed with so much energy in the last years that your real physical persona has been weakened.
Mhm, mhm. And famously on the internet, you can pretend to be anybody, and people have done, with great success.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um, so Can I just ask you? I know you're interviewing me here, really, but why Ecuador?
Interesting question. Well, to be honest, Ecuador was a little bit of a coin flipped,
Coin toss.
and then afterwards, after a little bit of research, I realized that why not? I mean, of all the different places
Mm.
that I had in mind, it was the place that had the best conditions for me. And surprisingly enough, when I got here, I already had a job, which is
Ah, okay.
I think that not many people that I know had the chance of saying, because when I got here, I didn't have papers. And you
Mm-hmm.
know that going anywhere and working without papers is really hopeless. It's just hopeless. My brother, for instance, he lived 7 months in Rotterdam, and he couldn't really make it. Couldn't really make it because of the papers,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
And as him, many other people that I know, even in Latin America, I got a big friend of mine that lived in Argentina for almost a year, trying to make it out without. That was before the pandemic and before the Venezuelan 2010s crisis. Before that, he went there and still he struggled so much that he had to spend a time living in the streets. So going and living at a place without a different country without papers was really not a good thing, and I was lucky enough to survive it because of that, because I found a job before I got here to Ecuador. So Ecuador gave
Mm.
me so many different opportunities in that regard that little by little I think that the country won my heart. I
Oh, okay.
wasn't willing to stay. In fact, I was hoping to use Ecuador as a bridge to go to the place I wanted to go, which is and have always been Japan. But now
Oh,
we are about to enter into World War III, and possibly Japan is gonna
yeah.
be drawn into the fray. And I realize, my God, I'm so lucky.
Mm. Yeah. 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 Oh, it's just I haven't even looked at the news, to be honest, today. That's goodness. What kind of a shock. It came as a shock to me, I have to say.
Oh
I
yeah,
didn't think it would happen.
we were
Yeah.
watching movies that they were selling us the Russians as the enemy for years.
Well, I mean, there are people who still believe that the Russians controlled Trump and had
Exactly.
that Trump was a puppet and that they had some kind of compromising material and they were blackmailing him and they had single-handedly changed the result of the presidential election and they'd fixed the Brexit referendum. I mean, I just see a huge increase in paranoia everywhere
Oh yes.
amongst educated people that believe in that these kind of enemy actors are deceiving us and tricking us and forcing us to work against our own interests. And you see that relation to Russia. You see it in the trans debate all the time, and you see it with the anti-vaxxers. It's this real kind of ugly paranoia that's everywhere.
Well,
You
they
know.
look like forced scenarios if you think about this. Like, whoever thought that we would be involved between NATO and Russia? Like, come on. They have been at
Mm.
odds for years. They have been at odds for years.
Yeah.
But who would ever
Yeah.
thought that in a day like today, in which everything that you do, people will find out. Like everything is out there. You cannot really be secretive about anything in your life, and still,
Mhm.
someone like Putin decides to, okay, you know what? I'm gonna move the border. Why? Because you guys didn't give me any option, and it's true. I mean, think about this. What happened in Libya? What happened in Syria? Or in all these countries? These countries, just before the thing that befell them happened, they were normal countries, countries in which
Mhm.
regular citizens could live, could go in,
Mhm.
go out with no issues.
Mhm.
Then suddenly, freedom attacked. You know what I mean by freedom?
Yep. I
And
do indeed. Yes.
what happened to Libya? What happened to Syria? I mean,
Hmm.
that's so sad. There's no other way to put it. Do you think that someone like Vladimir Putin was gonna be saying like, yeah, I'm gonna be used as what happened to Syria or Libya? I mean, I'm gonna be let my back be pressure in such ways that I will not have any option to move. No, 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 no. I'm gonna make my move first because I'm not stupid. I'm not
Yeah.
Syria. I'm not Libya.
Right.
I'm not gonna do that.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
he makes a move that is only logically acceptable from his perception.
Hmm.
But we
Hmm.
know that this move is the worst move ever because it's not that no one is gonna back down on the words. All the words is I'm gonna go against you with guns, and the other ones I'm gonna receive you with guns, and that's the path we seem to be taking.
Yeah. Hmm.
Sad. It's
Hmm.
terrible.
Hmm.
It's sad
It's
because the age of communication. I always see this problem as like this is the curse that we humans have of among all the species living in this planet. We have been cursed with language. And what
mm,
is language for us? A cage of
mm,
traps, bunch of different traps.
mm, mhm,
You know how to communicate, but you know also that in your communication you're gonna be, putting your finger on the other person's grievances, and that person's gonna react badly, and you will say, "Oh, I don't know what to do, but I still have to stick my finger there."
yeah, I mean, I think someone should do a study of discourse on Twitter, you know, and how it became just so ugly, how
Yes.
it became people just shouting at each other. How did we get, and was there something that we could have changed, to fix? But, I think, honestly, Edgar, like I left Venezuela at the end of December 2007. So that was just when the crash, maybe it was a bit later. It was maybe in late 2008. Um, and really, that was the start of everything that has gone wrong since,
Yes.
possibly with the exception of the pandemic. But just this, because it was the poor that were made in Europe, the poor were made to carry the burden.
Yeah.
And that's what caused this sharp turn to the right across Europe, most obviously in Brexit, which
Which,
was
which is
voted for
weird.
by the.
It's weird that he conceded with Obama.
If what, sorry? If
It's weird that he coincided with Obama raised to power in 2008.
Yeah, I mean, Obama was a candidate of the liberal elite, Um, there was nothing particularly oppressive about Obama. I mean, it was oppressive that he was the first black candidate to be elected, but in terms of what he actually did, I mean, I think a very line of continuity with Clinton and everyone else before him, back to Reagan and so forth. It's not like he was. It's not like he was the champion of the oppressed, unless you weren't really paying attention.
But that's the
So
problem. That's what's being sold. It's the same situation with Biden now. Biden
yeah.
wins. Why? Because of people getting sick of Trump, right?
Mm.
But before
Mm.
Trump, Obama paved the way for what Trump did. If you think about all the
Mm.
numbers of
Yeah.
what these people have been doing, it's pretty much the same party. For me, it's pretty much the same party,
Mm. Mm.
right?
Mm. Mm.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
we know that every situation or every scenario is even worse. Like, for example, just before Biden won, we saw that the confrontation was getting worse and worse with China. It was Trump versus China. Then
Mm.
suddenly, Biden comes onto fray, and you get to listen to this situation that is a secret that everybody knows about of Hunter Biden's case of corruption in
Mm.
in in in, uh, in Kiev, also, right?
Yeah.
We
Mhm.
know about of this situation. We know that it's happening, and what happens right after Biden wins? He basically says Russia's gonna pay. So we know,
Mm.
okay, we lost Trump that was gonna fight China, and now we got Biden that is gonna fight Russia. what are we actually gaining? We're not gaining.
What's the lesson is that people need an enemy. So if you want power, you need to create an enemy,
Oh
which
yes.
they're very good at doing.
Oh yeah.
Sadly.
Sad though.
So are you hearing anything from Venezuela? I stopped following it in despair, but what's happening
Well,
in Venezuela now?
to be honest, speaking about the pace in which everything was made to be, it seemed that whatever Chavez did was turned the other way around by Maduro.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's so terrible to think that Maduro is there because Chavez wanted him to be there.
Yeah.
And
And he was
all
very
the,
loyal to Chavez, wasn't he, Maduro? Like he was
yeah,
just the kind of boring number two.
but
But he is. What do you think his end project is, Maduro?
there is no project. Maduro is doing
No.
what governments before Chavez used to do.
Mm-hmm.
No
Yeah,
project.
it's just letting it decline.
Yeah, no project. Just fighting with the crisis, seeing what they can do about it. But there's no project.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, worst thing is the opposition. The opposition was the one who
Oh
had
God.
made the government as powerful as the government is. Someone as Guaido, the only legitimized Maduro's position forever and ever.
Yep. Yep. They never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. I think that's an Irish saying. I don't know.
Yeah, sad true. Anyway, going back a little bit to more positive things.
Yes.
I was
I thought I was talking about my holidays. God damn it.
oh, good. Yeah, that's a good one to speak about. Holidays, plans.
So you want me to talk about what I've done in the past, or?
Yeah, the question I was gonna speak about is one of the main ideas of today's conversation. Um, Living, in this case, traveling around the world, while at the same time bonding with other people through language. So, first place that you went to, which was it?
Work, you mean? Well, to be honest, because I studied French, I spent a year in Paris, which was lovely. I mean, I wanted Paris because it was, it was a great city of culture, and it had the Louvre, and it had the Tour Eiffel, and all this stuff. It was before Web 2.0, and actually the Parisians are not very friendly people. And so actually it was quite a lonely year, funnily enough, because there weren't the same opportunities, I think, to meet people online with all these different websites as there are now. But after I graduated, then I decided, because I'd always had this fascination for just how diverse the world is, and I had this fascination for abroad, and I loved foreign movies and non-English language movies, and most people in the country I grew up in don't learn any other languages, but I wanted to, because I thought it was quite shameful that we English speakers only insist that we speak, everybody else speaks our language. So I learned French. So I decided that I wanted to use the fact that I am a native speaker of English to my advantage, and work by teaching. I didn't want it to be my career, because many countries it's just horribly paid. But I thought it would be, I would be able to take 3 years out of my life. I would have 3 years or so. And I did this when I was 25. That's when I came to Venezuela. And to have, just to have these really different experiences while my contemporaries were settling into their jobs in insurance agencies and banks and stuff. I would be in Chichirivici or somewhere like that in Venezuela. I remember the name. And, this would be good. So I went to Venezuela for about a year, 2007. I was in China for the whole of the following year, 2008. And then I went to Germany, and I did that for money, really, because I wanted to set myself up for the next thing. But with some of the money, I could take a 6-month trip around Latin America and South America, really. So that's how I finished. I went from Santiago de Chile up to Sao Paulo, and then I flew to Mexico, and that was my last stop. So it was about 3 years before I came back to the UK, where I lived before. of work, then travel, then work, then travel.
Okay.
And it was all outside of Europe. I wanted it to be not in Europe and not in what you might term the first world. I wanted it to be in South America or Asia, basically.
Well,
Just because of the difference.
I remember once I read from you in social media once you enter North Korea, and I asked you, what? Of all the places that you've been, this is the place in which you could have been the least conspicuous. What? Can you tell us, please?
Can you do what exactly, sorry?
Can you tell us a little bit of your experience in North Korea?
Well, I mean, I suppose you could say about me as a person. I'll just turn this. The internet's kind of coming on and off. I'll turn this video on. I sometimes I like to be controversial. Okay, just as a sort of a personality trait, and I like to be different, and I like to do things that other people don't do. I mean, nobody that I grew up with had heard of Venezuela. Where? But rather than going to Spain, which is a common destination for English teachers, I thought, no, I want to go to, and this job came up, and I thought, why not? So I like going to countries where my government doesn't necessarily always want me to go. So I've also been to Iran, which was stunning. I'll maybe tell you about that later. But I was living and working in China, and I happened to see this online that there were these effectively package tours or package holidays to North Korea. And the legal situation is that as a foreigner, the only legal way to enter North Korea is by a tour. And once you go in, of course, you'll be surrounded by secret police and you'll be watched all the time. And of course, everything you see will be so carefully presented to you. Okay, you'll never see a dirty rag on the floor. You'll never see any litter. You won't be able to speak to people, but you'll see these great buildings, and everything will be presented as this country is just such a great country because it's so controlled. Okay, but I thought I would like to go there just to, I don't know if I can swear in this podcast. I do. I'm sorry. Just to see what BS they give to me, right?
Of course.
And just because it's a story to tell. So I did this tour, and I went with a group called China Travel Service. So I was mainly with Chinese people as the other people on the tour, and they had their 2 Korean guides, and I was the only English speaker, and I had 2 for me myself. Okay. And they told me this was when the Kim Jong-il, the former leader, was alive. So the father of the current Kim Jong-un. Okay. And how wonderful the great leader is, and how he is admired throughout the world. And the funny thing is, I don't know if you've noticed this, that sometimes people from the girl that told me this, the guide, she was a Korean girl, quite young, and she was telling me how all over the world, groups of foreigners had set up study groups to read the works of Kim Jong-il because he was revered as a genius in every country. And she couldn't get to the end of the sentence before she started laughing. So they know it's rubbish. Like, they all know that is nonsense. And she knew that I knew it was nonsense. But she had to tell it to me, and I had to listen and go, oh yeah, okay, perfect. And it was this, I don't know if you know this term in English, a looking glass world, right? It's like you go through the mirror into a strange alien country, But I just loved it because it's a great story, Yeah. I like that better than going to Ibiza or Bali or somewhere.
How long do you actually spend in North Korea?
Oh, only a few days. It was it was all planned. So I took the train from China over the border from Dandong, and you had to stay in the foreigner hotel, the only foreigner hotel, and you would go here, you would go there. I don't know if you've heard of the Ararang, but it's a giant gymnastics performance. You might find it on YouTube. Ararang is Ararang, I think. and they have this. It's like a mass dance performance,
Oh.
and they have these school kids that hold up colored pieces of cards, and they do it so quickly and so well that it makes pictures behind the dancers, and so they're part of the performance too. And this is this great thing that the North Koreans do, and they're very proud of. So I got to see that, and that was amazing. Yeah, and then I went back to China, and then the Olympics happened, which was another really fascinating thing.
I always felt that traveling as it is, the experience of traveling as it is enough to make your brain somehow open to stuff.
Yeah.
Like the moment that you go out of the area that you not only are learning, but you're also growing mentally, spiritually, and in many other different forms. And obviously, in your case, you've met people from everywhere. You've seen different situations, and you've felt different vibes also from all these people. Tell me one of the places that you felt like the hottest vibration of people around you, like things that were happening constantly, like you felt invigorated by them. One of the places of all the different places where you live or spend some time, which was it?
Honestly, I don't know if this will be a good answer, but my favorite city in the world is London.
Oh,
and London is right next to because for me, London is the crossroads of the world, right?
Okay.
If you go to London, you will find whatever food you want, whatever music you want, whatever sport you want, whatever culture you want, because people come from literally every corner of the globe. I think even more than New York and even more than Paris, which would be the other two global cities. I think London is I don't think London is English. I think London belongs to the planet now, really. I was lucky enough to live in London for a couple of years, and I loved it, but I had no money and I couldn't stand it because I was living in one room, and I just had to leave to go back and stay with my family for a bit in Scotland. But I am thinking of going to London again this summer, actually, because if you have enough money to live, okay, if you have an okay job, it's just the fact that it is so diverse. They speak hundreds of languages in the city schools because children come there from everywhere. It's so diverse and it's so different, but it all seems to work together. And the city is physically, it's such a huge place. But I'll tell you something that maybe is a slightly different answer to your question. The place I thought was the most different to me as a white European was China. Okay. Culturally, because you realize when you go to China that, number one, of course, Chinese is horribly hard to learn. I tried twice. I didn't. I think for you or I to learn Chinese with our native languages would take 10 years, right? Because it's you have to memorize the writing system. You need to memorize 3,000 characters to read a newspaper.
Just the writing system. I got a lot of trouble simply by remembering the tone system for pronunciation. The E,
Did you try and learn Chinese yourself?
I tried. Yeah. I tried to learn Mandarin for about 3 months. I learned to say a couple phrases, but that's it.
Yeah, I went to a school for a couple months just to. I could have a very basic conversation, but for me, I learned by reading. Okay. And that was the problem because I couldn't read in Chinese without first of all memorizing 3,000 characters, and there's no shortcut to doing that. Chinese kids are not literate to the age of 9, not fully literate, because they have to memorize all these characters, and they do it by rote learning.
So that's what you meant about the 10 years, right?
I'm sorry?
That's what you meant about the 10-year difference for learning the language. Just the fact that kids there are totally literate by the age of 9.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's just, it's just learning to write. And, that if I say a word in English or Spanish that you don't know, you could probably guess how to spell it, right? But if someone says a word in Chinese you don't know, then you can't guess the character. So that's the problem. But anyway, so they have this very foreign language, but also it's such an old culture, and it's really been there for 2,000 years, and its roots are in old Chinese thought, Confucius and so forth, with certain precepts for good behavior and appropriate behavior and poor behavior. And these things have a real staying power, such that I found there was much more opportunity for cultural misunderstanding. And it was really, you only learn by trial and error. And I found that sometimes it was very hard to, the Chinese were very friendly and full of goodwill, the sort of young Chinese that I spoke to. But sometimes it was very hard to have a meeting of the minds because our perspectives were so different. And so, for example, one of the things I learned about people like myself, if you like, Europeans or Westerners, is that we have, compared to much of the rest of the world, a very exaggerated sense of, keep out of my personal space,
Yeah.
I think more so than South Americans, right? And much more so than Chinese. Because a Chinese person, if they have your number, could call you 10 times in a day just because they wanted to talk to you, Whereas, I was like, excuse me, can you stop calling me, please? I have my own life to live. Do you know what I mean? But we're much more sort of socially atomized, I think, in the West than other parts of the world. That was one thing that I noticed anyway. And also it's very easy for both of us to offend each other without meaning to, The two questions you'll be asked in China as a relatively young person are, how much money do you earn? And are you married? This is the first question. So this is meeting someone at a party. And if you're not married, the next question is, why aren't you married? You're already 25, So notions of what is acceptable, what is private and should be not intruded on, and what is public and acceptable to talk about are very different in different parts of the world, I think.
Yeah.
And if that's I think the influence of culture and the sort of underlying beliefs that kind of feed culture that we probably aren't fully aware of, really, are as important as language.
Yes, they characterize language because, for instance, when you were in China, we all know that China is a huge country. And we all know also that maybe if you live in more than one city, you definitely live different experiences in both. You can differentiate both. And it so happens here in Latin America the same way. We got, for example, Venezuelans and Colombians, though they are really historically related, are pretty different. And I live here in Ecuador, and I've seen my own differences with my interactions with locals constantly. We realize that that you were mentioning of how we perceive our own personal space, it varies in different subtle differences depending where you are. Like there are certain things that here are considered rude that we in Venezuela used to do, and vice versa. Like I don't know, what can I say? Like okay, in Venezuela, for example, flirting and going out, single people on each other is pretty fresh and clear, but at the same time, there is some level of decency that I'm not gonna flirt in front of a person that I've flirted before, kind of like this, right?
Right.
Whereas here, people tend to be more private, more quiet, more reserved. But when they do this, they do it more openly, a little bit shamelessly. It's so weird. It's so weird. And again, if that is just one example of so many other different things, like how we serve food and how we eat food, how we chat about personal stuff, on how we don't. But it's the situation of everywhere is like a different stance like of humanity. Okay, there have been humans here, and these humans have seen life from this perspective, and that's the reason probably why life is this way here. And that's the question that I asked you on the chat that I wanted to know too. But you already answered the first one about the places that you have felt the most human vibration. It's been London. What about the place which mornings you miss the most when you wake up?
Oh, gee. Morning. I miss it. Just because of how hopeful I felt, or
I don't know. You know
oh,
that I
okay.
am an Spinozian, and Spinoza is very crazy when it comes to how
Mm,
you perceive life. You have to perceive life always in a balance between how your body feels and how your reason feels. And if there is no balance between those two, then you're gonna have things that might be conflicting.
okay. Okay. In the mornings. Um. Well, I tell you what. Can it be a place I just went to on holiday rather than a place I lived?
Okay.
You know what I went that was just stunning in terms of nature.
Okay.
At the right time of year, which is winter. Okay, Patagonia. All right, Chilean
Oh,
Patagonia and Argentinian Patagonia. But
explain.
at winter time, when it was cold and all the tourists have gone, apart from me, that was when I. If you go at the right time, you just see the clarity of the mountains and the lakes and the countryside. And there's a park
Neil,
called Torres del Paine.
I seem to be losing you. Neil, I seem to be losing you. Can you hear me
Oops,
well?
sorry. Um, yes, I can. Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can
Can you
hear
hear me
you.
now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
My 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 phone rang and it interfered with the. I'm taking my internet off my phone at the minute for you don't want to know why. But
Don't worry.
so sorry, that's the reason.
You you were
No,
explaining
but as I said,
exactly.
I don't know.
You were explaining exactly in the moment you were saying that in the morning there's a clarity of, and that's when the flickering started.
Ah, yeah, just because the combination of like the great open spaces in Patagonia and the very blue sky, but also the fact that I went there in wintertime and
Uh,
the fact that it was in the southern hemisphere and on the route to Antarctica, if you want to go to Antarctica, you pass through Ushuaia, right? And I just found that there was a quality of the light that I hadn't seen anywhere else. It was a very white, very beautiful light that seemed kind of diffused everywhere and that I hadn't seen anywhere else in my travels. And so, as I said, I don't know if you heard me sing this before, but there's a mountain park in Chile called Torres del Paine, which are these great golden rocks that the sun rises and the rocks turn red and gold and orange. And I got some beautiful pictures there. I went camping one night into the morning, so I'll show you the photo on Facebook later.
that'll be awesome.
It's a stunning photo. So I thought I didn't know what to expect down there at all. But I thought just in terms of natural beauty, that was my favorite place in all my travels. But
Awesome.
particularly because, it was not hot, it was cold and clear.
Well, only you could enjoy that much. I've been in a cold place because to be
No,
honest, I don't know
oh
if
geez, Venezuela was too hot for me.
I
It was way too, no, I did not grow up like that and I could only stand it for a while.
well, where I live right now, we live in Guayaquil, and Guayaquil is not as Caracas. I mean, if you struggle with Caracas and you remember how hot was Valencia, well, it's sort of
Mm.
like Valencia, but all year round. I mean,
Oh really? Jeez.
yeah,
Right in the equator, of course.
exactly.
Rather you than me, I'm afraid. Do you know the problem with China as well?
Yeah.
Air pollution. The air pollution is disgusting.
Oh,
My
really?
hair was falling out because of the air pollution. It was awful.
Really?
So yeah.
Wow.
So that's the next, I think, global thing. What does China do? But you're breathing that in all day. It has horrible impact on
Oh my God,
you. Anyway,
that's so terrible. Of all the different places, China was one of those places that we were looking forward to. And now you know. Apparently, it's not that good. Not that good. We're reaching now the end of today's chat, but I will really love to have a second chat. I don't know if you will be interested, and but that
yeah.
one I would love to have it more on topic. Like I would like to give you
Mm.
the concept of it
Just right.
so you can think it before different than this one. This one was morely a catch up with you as a friend that
Sure,
I
sure.
haven't talked to for a long time. But that one I would like to be more on topic, as one of your topic is one of my hobbies, which is French philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
and I love that. But I love it more
Mm-hmm.
on the application of it. I don't know if you knew. I think that we once talked about a little bit about him. That I made my thesis graduation project on Slavoj Žižek, the idea of
Mm-hmm.
ideology today, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
really interested in the topic, and I want to prepare a little small article to send it to you. You can read it and we can discuss it. I don't know if you.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great.
That'd be awesome. That'd be
I
awesome.
would.
Well, the last question then is you
Mhm.
answer one question related to how you enjoy this place culturally, that was London, but was because of the people, and
Mm.
then you answer another question that was based on how you enjoy this place because of nature. All right.
Mm.
So
Mm.
now the last question is, if there was a place that you ever consider perfect for retirement, your retirement days, your last days, in which obviously
Mm.
you're gonna spend most of your time walking around your house and some of it
Mm.
indoors. What place do you think would it be and why?
Well, if I'm maybe I'm not very well, if I'm housebound, so I would want to be beside the sea, so I can look at the sea. Okay,
Yes.
I would appreciate that. I would want to be near family, extended family. So I can call them in a crisis, and I wouldn't want to be alone. I think, and I wouldn't want to be alone in a foreign country. I think in as an old person. So I guess the coast of Ireland would be my answer there, near the sea, and of course it's an island, so there is plenty of coast. And I'm thinking, I mean, in Northern Ireland, some of the places my aunts and uncles have lived, like Ballycastle or Carnlough or the Giant's Causeway. I'm sure you won't know these places, but you
No.
can Google pictures of them, and they're very nice to be at. And the weather, not too hot, not too cold, so make too much rain, but you can't have everything. So I guess I mean, I think it's um, how you prepare for retirement is another huge question. Um, but I don't want to depress myself. Start by getting a pension. God damn it! Get a job that gives you a pension. Those are things that are kind of necessary.
Well, I don't know. What about instead of like living out of paycheck to paycheck, living out of your, I don't know, your own shop? Have you ever considered that? Having some sort of shop,
Oh,
cafe,
Jesus.
inn, something?
And then you have to decide what the public wants so you can give it to them. Gee, oh God. There was a man in the small village where my mother grew up, the village of Carnlough, who had this little seaside shop
Okay.
that sold like buckets and spades and food and, little postcards. And he kept trying and trying to sell the shop and couldn't get it sold so he could retire. And in the end, he died in the shop, and then they
Oh,
just closed it. So,
okay. That's not very promising.
something like that can be a burden. Do you know what I mean? I don't mean to depress your audience. I wonder if anybody's listened to the end of this, but thank you.
Don't worry about
Thanks to
it.
them for making it through. Anyway,
They will feel glad to listen that there are other options apart from that. And believe me, you nail it with the beach side, because that's on my retirement house too. And
oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And the place which is neither cold nor hot, there is a place in Venezuela. I don't know if I will ever return to Venezuela, but there is a place that has those characteristics. Is the mountain Enripidier Mountain or Park,
Mm.
and that's basically the mountain that divides the city from the beach side of Maracay and Valencia.
Mm.
Okay, and that mountain, as it
Oh
is,
yes.
which is in the pretty north side of the country, it's some of the places where they have all cacao plantations. Therefore, smells, the temperature of
Mm.
the place, everything around it is just beautiful, beautiful.
Mm.
So having a
Okay.
place where you
Hmm.
know have like the mountain right there and a few kilometers the beach, and it's a beautiful beach like those beaches around Maracay, incredible. But
I remember them to some extent. Yeah, I remember the yeah, but for I don't know. For me, the heat would be would be a problem. A fact. Do you remember how sunburnt I got on that beach trip? My
yeah,
legs were blistering. It was horrible.
I remember
My skin isn't made for that climate, you know. But there we are.
a little bit of adaptation too, you know, like eating a
Indeed.
little bit more certain type of local foods that will help you with the skiing. But what you're saying is true. There are certain places that don't go necessarily well with some people. Like for me, the cold, I don't think that I have never been in a really, really, really cold place. But I don't think that's
Mm.
gonna be a problem, so much of a problem. But maybe height can be, as
Hmm.
I went once to Quito, the capital of Ecuador, for
Mm.
visiting Francia's cousin for a few days. And the first day that I was there, I couldn't breathe well because, yeah, I was afraid
Yeah.
of the height. And I didn't think that that was possible on me. I thought, "Ah, I'm a strong man." Not really.
Oh no, altitude sickness is a real thing. You know, Bolivia. If you ever go to Bolivia, um, I found it was hard to climb the stairs in Bolivia
Ooh.
just because you're trying to breathe and you're not getting the oxygen because there's less of it, so you have to breathe heavier. You know,
Oh, yeah.
it's yeah, it's quite something.
Neil, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, and I would love to have this conversation soon enough. The podcast, as it is, the episode is not gonna come out so soon since I have a lot of videos waiting on the list.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm,
this one
mm-hmm.
is obviously the
Have
last
to.
I'm recording, and I'm gonna put it right after. But don't worry that before it's being put, if you want some things change or add, we're gonna speak before me putting the last edit. Is there
Perfect.
one last thing that you would like to make known of people around the world for both audiences, yours and mine, that you would like to say?
Oh Jesus. No, just to say that you married very well, and I want to say hello to Francia as well.
Thank you, thank you. Francia is actually
You were
is listening.
there.
She's not presentable, but she's listening.
Oh,
And if you want to say something,
Yeah. Hello, Neil.
hi, how are you? I've missed you.
Pretty cool. Just listening
The
to your
the,
conversation.
next podcast, be presentable so I can see you and wave to you.
Oh, yes, that's true. The things that I was cooking, and you know.
Oh, okay.
she has the
Traditional
typical.
gender roles in this house.
Not really. I am the one who
No,
cooks
he's
most
the
of the
one
time.
who cooks the most.
Ah, very
I
good.
cook on weekends.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. We're on carnival now, so I'm kind of a
Is
little
there a
bit.
carnival in Ecuador? Didn't know that.
Yes, yes, it is.
Oh well. That's something I really want to see as a proper carnival, like a
Oh,
Brazilian carnival. Like I've never
Brazil.
really seen like a real carnival. Do you know what I mean? I've maybe seen a little thing.
Yeah, that Brazil carnival is great. Not here carnival. Here was good. Maybe in Cuenca a little bit. It's another city that is like 3 hours away from this one. But I don't think the carnivals is a party or holiday that's that fun. Here, if you're interested in visiting Ecuador, there are few places that for you will be very interesting. Of course, the capital, and you will not have problems with the weather in
Oh,
Quito because that place cold. And then suffering a little bit, you have another place for you, Baños, which nature will basically sell it enough for you. I mean, it's beautiful, that place. And to suffer a little bit more, that will be Galapagos, which
Ah,
basically,
yeah. Hmm.
yeah, you will see species that you won't have a chance ever in your world to get to see. That going there or going to those crazy Malaysian islands that you see all these animals that look like aliens too. I would love
Mm.
to be to one of those islands too. I don't
Hmm.
know
Hmm.
if you got to know a little bit about it when you were around Asia.
I never went to Malaysia, so I haven't heard of those. No, I'm afraid.
Oh man,
But I'll have to. Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, they have some
Do you
places.
know I? Sorry, go on. Sorry.
No, I was saying they have some places there. You were telling me.
I tried to learn Spanish again, and I actually went to Guatemala. And
Oh,
Grant, they have a great Spanish in Guatemala because it's very slow and I can pick it up perfectly. So my Spanish was actually quite good, but now I've had to spend all my time teaching French. So I'll have to come back again. And I don't bother with going to Spain. I keep coming back to Latin America for some reason. There's something very interesting about the continent, if I can put it that way. I don't know what it is, but there's something very alive about it. So I haven't been to Ecuador or to Colombia. Or to anything in like San Salvador and all those things, but in South Ecuador and Colombia and Guyana. So I'll have to visit one of those as well.
well, whenever you're interested in coming by, let us know, man. We give you the tour.
Will do. Will do. Great. Okay.
Well, Neil, it's been a pleasure, and I hope I get to see you soon.